Jordan, and this is the Andalusia Knits Knitting Podcast. We are on episode 15 today, and I have a ton of stuff to talk about. It has been about a month since I released a podcast episode, which is kind of crazy, and it definitely shows. So today I'm going to talk you through a pattern release I have, a almost pattern release I have, a few new designs, something has come out of hibernation, and I also have a couple of fails to show you as long as you promise not to be too mean about them. But I guess that's going to do it in terms of an introduction. Like I said, this is going to be a packed episode, so I don't want to waste any time. But if you enjoy knitting podcasts like this, I would go ahead and encourage you to subscribe to the channel so that you never miss an upload from me. But with that, let's get to the knitting. Okay, so first up today, I guess this is more of an announcement than a finished object because you did see this in the last episode as well. But I am excited to announce that the walking distance scarf is now officially available as a pattern, and that is available to download on Ravelry if you're interested. And I'll provide a link to that pattern in the description below. And I will also link to a video I uploaded a week or so ago that is basically the promotional video for this scarf, where it walks you through like all of the major points about like what's going on with the design and that sort of thing. But I did just want to mention a couple things about this design in today's video because I just love this thing so much. I'm so pleased with how this turned out. And one of the big reasons that I am so super duper pleased with this is the yarn choice. Like, I couldn't have made a better yarn choice for this. So the sample that I knit uses Peace Fleece DK from Harrisville Designs, which is a really nice, lovely, very light, lofty woolen spun yarn that is a blend of wool and mohair. And for an accessory like this, like I could not have like gotten luckier with the yarn choice. Because it is a woolen spun yarn, that means that the fibers have been prepared in such a way that it maximizes the amount of air that gets trapped between the individual fibers, which creates a very lightweight yarn relative to its yardage. And so this thing is like, it's 8 inches across and like 75 inches long, but I actually haven't put this on a scale. I should have put this on a scale before I started recording, but if I had to guess, like, I would say this is probably under 100 grams, which is kind of crazy. It's so cozy, it's so comfy. I'm super bummed that it is currently springtime where I live, and so I don't really need a very warm insulating scarf at this point in the year, but you better believe this is coming out in the fall and the winter when the temperatures finally warrant it. And the other thing that I wanted to mention about the design is that this is a perfect pattern for someone who is interested in trying Intarsia but has never taken the plunge, is maybe a little intimidated of it. And that is because while it does call for 6 balls of yarn across the entire body of the scarf, basically, it's a very simple rhythmic sort of like striping pattern that I've come up with. And there's also a video tutorial that I have available that teaches you how to manage multiple balls of yarn when knitting Intarsia without having to worry about things getting tangled up and without having to worry about winding and using bobbins. So if this looks like something you want to do but you're afraid that it might be above your skill level, I promise you, if you can knit and purl, like, I can walk you through all the rest of the basics. Like, I wanted a bold design that was deceptively simple to knit, and I think I really hit the nail on the head with this one. So yeah, like, if you are an Intarsia newbie or a Colorwork newbie, don't let this scare you. I have designed it specifically with you in mind as a good, like, first Intarsia Colorwork project. So anyways, this is the walking distance scarf, and like I said, it's available on Ravelry now, and the link to that pattern will be in the description below. Next up today, I have a finished object, and this is the Chosen One Cowl, and it is soon to become my next design release. So this is a tube cowl that is knit in the round, and then both ends are grafted together shut with a twist in the cowl as well. And this is done in stranded color work, and if you look closely, this is another design that I've done where I have knit the background stitches and purled the contrast color stitches, and I just really love how that gives just a nice little like textural pop to the Colorwork proceedings. And if you'll notice, this is another design where I'm using zigzag stripes because I have an addiction. I'm sick in the head for zigzag and I just can't quit it. And if you have watched any of my podcast episodes in the past, this cowl might look a little familiar because this is actually based on a scarf design that I did last year that I was also calling the Chosen One. And I ultimately never ended up releasing it because while I loved this zigzag lightning bolt motif that I put in the original scarf, the original project also had about 1 million other motifs, and it was just so like busy and over designed that I just wasn't feeling good about it. But I really, really, really loved these zigzag stripes, and I knew that I wanted to incorporate that design into something else. And I'm very excited that I have finally managed to do that with this cowl. And so I have to admit, I have never been a cowl person in the past. I was never like explicitly opposed to them, but I was always just like, it's just like a scarf that's already been wrapped for you. It's a lazy person scarf. But now that I have knit this one and I've knit a couple others, I'm kind of learning to love them. Now, once again, like I mentioned in the walking distance section, it is springtime pushing summer where I live, so I'm not going to be able to wear this out of the house for another 6 months at least, probably. But oh boy, I am ready for winter when it comes. Because like I said, I love this design. And so the yarn that I've knit this sample out of is Barocco Vintage DK, which is a blend of acrylic and wool. It's not exactly a 50-50 blend, and I think there might be like a small amount of nylon in there as well. But it has, like, over the last 6 months or so, it's kind of become one of my like favorite just like workhorse yarns. It's nothing to write home about, but considering that it's half acrylic, it feels and breathes so nicely. I don't know what kind of wool they're putting in this thing, but it's really compensating nicely for the acrylic. And it's great for accessories like these where you don't want to spend an arm and a leg. And the color choices are great. I don't know, like I just really love this yarn. I've been pleasantly surprised by the yarn, pleasantly surprised by the design. And while this one is not yet a pattern, I am currently in the process of working on that one, and hopefully, fingers crossed, who knows, within the next couple weeks that will be released. And in addition to the pattern, I'm also going to be releasing a tutorial to go along with it that is going to teach you how to do a longtail provisional cast on. And so basically that is because when you knit the scarf, like I said, you're grafting the starting stitches, the starting round to the end round, and you need live stitches to be able to do that. And so this provisional cast on is a way to like cast on and then later go back and unpick that cast on so that you have the live stitches you need to do the grafting. And I like this long tail version specifically, and that's kind of a misnomer. Well, I'll get into it in the tutorial, but it's called a long tail provisional cast on because it mimics the traditional long tail cast on, how you do that. And while it's not the fastest provisional cast on, it's not one that you can like unpick one stitch and then just rip the rest of them out or anything like that. But I do appreciate it because it's a provisional cast on that does not require you to have a crochet hook, which is another common way of making a provisional cast on. And once again, I can get into all of this in the tutorial, but basically I wanted to find a provisional cast on that didn't require you to like go out and buy another tool should you not have a crochet hook on hand. And while I am pleased with the provisional cast on itself, I did find the grafting of this thing to be a little fiddly and more difficult than I was expecting. It's probably a good thing that I did the background color in such a dark color so you can't really see all of the mistakes I made in the grafting. And so you'll see in an upcoming finished object that I have been doing a little bit of experimenting in terms of how to get both ends of these tube style cowls to be attached. And this is one way, and this is what I'm going to go for in the pattern just because like the ball is already rolling. I've already got all this stuff in motion. But it's not the only way, and you'll see shortly here in a minute that it's not the only way that I'm going to show you today of how you can join the ends of a tube together. So anyways, that is the Chosen One cowl. It's been a long time coming. Like I said, this started all the way back last year. But I'm finally almost ready to release this design, and this is another great, cozy, striking, striped pattern of mine. All right, I've got another finished object for you, and you might think you're seeing double at first because it is another in the round tube cowl, and the design is actually pretty similar to what you just saw in the chosen one cowl. And this one doesn't have a name yet. I'm not quite sure what to call it, but I wanted to do a variation on the chosen one after I got through that sample because it posed a problem that I was not anticipating. And so I don't know if you noticed in the last one, actually let me pull it back out and show you close up. So the nature of doing this like stranded colorwork technique where I knit the background stitches and purl the contrast color stitches is that the more contrast color stitches show up in the design, you start to get these little like foldy sort of ridges in the stripes. And at first I thought, well, maybe that is just like bad float tension. Maybe I'm not tensioning my floats correctly, but well, I guess I can't show you now because this thing is seemed closed. But you know, I inspected that, and the floats are fine. If anything, the floats are kind of loosey goosey, and it didn't explain why it was just happening in the purl contrast sections and why I wasn't getting puckering in the background knit sections. And while I don't exactly know the specific, I can't like talk to you about the specific physics of why this happens. Like I noticed that it happens the wider the stripes get. So when we're down here, like, and the stripes are like 3 stitches wide, it's not noticeable at all. And then as the stripes get wider and wider, you start to notice that sort of like folding ridge-like effect happening more and more. And it has to be something to do with the difference in tension between knits and purls. But for this design, honestly, I didn't hate the way that it looked with that way. Like it gave it kind of like a cozy, like quilted look. But you know, the perfectionist that I am, I couldn't just leave it at that. I wanted like a zigzag stripe design where I wasn't getting any of that like folded, sort of like quilted ridged look. And so for this design, it's using similar zigzag stripes, but they never get any wider than 5 stitches across. And that's about the breaking point I found before you start to really notice that, that effect like in the previous cowl. And this one has pleasantly surprised me, but it has also disappointed me a little bit in one way. So I have knit this in a different yarn. This is not Barocco. This is Knit Picks Swish DK, which is their like superwash offering from Knit Picks. And I did this variegated yarn. This is from their Swish Pops line. I don't remember the exact colorway this is, but it's some genre of music. All of the colorways were different genres of music, which is how they suckered me into buying this variegated yarn that is okay, but not great. Like, I think that the variegation has worked all right for this design. I was a little worried at first that it might like muddy the stripes and you wouldn't be able to tell that there's some zigzagging going on. And I think that the zigzagging is visible and evident, but I'm gonna have to knit another sample of this before I put it out into the world as a pattern, simply because there's just something about the variegated stripes that this doesn't feel like the definitive sample. Like, it looks good, but it was, like I said, it was a pleasant surprise that it looked good. I don't want my design to surprise me in that way. And I feel like if I do go back and do this in 2 solid colors, it will just like illustrate what's going on a little bit more clearly for viewers and people who might want to knit this. And so, like I said, I don't hate this. I love how this turned out, but for whatever weird reason, this is just not the definitive sample of this design in my mind. So I'm gonna have to go back and knit the definitive sample. And I don't have the yarn with me, but I already have the yarn picked out for the second sample of this that I'm gonna knit. And it is Barocco Vintage DK, surprise, surprise. And the reason I'm going back to that brand is because this stuff grew on me a lot. And chime in if you can like explain like what happened, like where I went wrong or where the yarn went wrong. Because basically what I did was I knit 2 repeats of this chart pattern, which is like 80 rounds total. So I had 80 rounds of work to measure from, and that was my swatch. And so then I washed and blocked that and those 2 repeats, and I was like, okay, it looks like if my measurements are correct, I've knit 2 repeats. If I knit 5 repeats total, that will put me at about 32 inches, which is exactly where I wanted to be when it came time to seam up. So I was like, all right. So then I put it back on the needles. I knit my 3 more repeats. I had my 5 total repeats, washed and blocked it, expecting 32 inches, and it was fully 40 inches long when it came out of the water. Now, as it dried, it did shrink a little bit, but it's still like at 36, 37 inches. And so while I had seen comments online of people saying this yarn is going to grow, like how did it grow to surprise me that much the second time? Because like I said, the first 2 repeats of this pattern was basically my swatch. I had a good substantial, size to measure from, but I was just completely off. I had to like hit a button on the calculator wrong or write down a number wrong or something. I cannot figure out like how I was so drastically off in my gauge. Or maybe it was just like by the time I got to 5 repeats, the weight of the cowl was just starting to stretch itself out more. I don't know, it's a mystery, but this one ended up being a little long, and I also wanted to try a cowl this time that doesn't have a twist in it, so this one's just a tube attached to itself normally, and I have to say I don't like it as much. I think the fact that it's bigger, like I feel like I could get away with this more. But I would prefer a little snugger of a cowl with an actual twist in it, I think. And as far as joining the 2 ends, so this time I did something, and it's a little bit more visible, but honestly, I loved the process a lot more. And so what I did was, there's no grafting, no provisional cast on or anything like that. I just did a regular cast on and a regular bind off, and then I used a yarn and a darning needle to like create a row of stitches in between the cast on and the bind off edge. And so it's not perfectly invisible because, my tension was not perfect, but also because there are like 2, like the cast on ridge and the cast off ridge are being hidden on the inside of the work now. And so it does kind of create like a visible seam line. But like I said, I found this process so much more enjoyable. It wasn't even necessarily faster, but it was just a lot less stressful to not have to worry about live stitches when I was seaming this thing up. And so I'm almost thinking that like this slight visible seam is worth the stress that it saves me. And as long as you make sure that the seam is in the back, like you're never going to be able to see it. And even people behind you are probably not even going to take notice. And if they do, like, I don't know, it looks intentional. It's not perfectly invisible, but I think this might be what I want to do going forward in terms of designing shawls like this. So anyways, this is my as of yet unnamed shawl. It's still going to be a hot minute before this one gets released. This is like I said, the chosen one is going to be my next release. This is probably going to be 2 or 3 out because I still have to knit a second one to get a good sample, and I'm just not, I'm not in the mood to knit a second one immediately after I finish this one. Okay, now we're moving into some in progress projects. And this first one, I don't know if this is going to be a design. It may be, I don't know if it warrants being a design or if it just needs to be like a 5-minute YouTube video. But I have finished one sock in a new pair. And basically, this is the same sock that I have been knitting for the last 3 or 4 years at this point. And my thought is that I would like to do a design that teaches you how to knit a sock that can hold up to a lot of wear and tear. I feel like there are a lot of angles out there for how to knit different kinds of socks, but to me, since socks are being like are taking the most abuse from us because we're literally walking on them when we use them, the most important, the one thing that I need a sock to be, I don't need a sock to be cute, I don't need a sock to be anything but able to like withstand being walked on by my fat ass all day, every day. And so I'm thinking about creating a sort of like tutorial style walkthrough about how to create just like the most durable socks possible. But I keep going back and forth on whether that like warrants a full like tutorial pattern treatment, or if I should just like come up up with like a list of tips and just make a YouTube video about it. So I'm still sort of debating back and forth on, you know, where to take this. But as far as this particular sock that I've just knit recently, like I said, it's basically the same sock that I knit all the time, but there was a couple changes I made actually on this. I was a little dishonest at first. And so the first thing that I did differently is I shortened the leg on this, and that was simply in the hopes that I might be able to get some wear out of these socks even in the warmer months. So normally I knit my socks in 100% wool, and I live in the American South. And so I can comfortably wear my socks like through May, and then I can uncomfortably wear my socks through June most of the time. But by the time July hits, like I cannot be wearing wool socks anymore. And one of the reasons that they feel so like claustrophobic and constricting is not because they're made out of wool, but because they kind of go up a considerable length on my leg. And so I wanted to try making them a little bit shorter to see if like giving the top of my ankle or whatever a little bit more breathing room would make things more bearable. I still imagine that these are going to get super duper hot by the dog days of summer or whatever, because they're knit so densely and they're made out of wool. But I knit them a little bit shorter in the hopes that I could at least extend my wear time a little bit. And the other thing I did differently, I'm really regretting that I'm going to have to do it the same on the second sock because I don't want them to be different from one another. And that is, I didn't do anything when I grafted the toe of this to stop the dog ears. So that is one thing, like preventing dog ears when you're grafting a toe is something that I have done from basically the very first pair of socks I knit. The pattern I used, I don't even remember what it is now, but I do remember that it did warn you about like the dog ear phenomenon that you can get sometimes when you're grafting the toe, and it gave a technique for how to avoid that. And I don't quite remember what that technique was either. I pretty quickly found Roxanne Richardson's tutorial video where she shows you how to avoid dog ears by binding off stitches at both ends of both needles before you start the grafting. And so I've done that for years at this point, but I've never just like straight up grafted it without worrying about the dog ears. And so I wanted to try that this time, and I was like, what's the worst that could happen? And the worst that could happen is that I don't like the way it looks, and now I'm mad that I'm going to have to do it this way for the second sock again. And I guess in theory I could unpick this graft and do it again, but that sounds even more maddening than just like learning to live with the tiny dog ears on the edges of this thing. So yeah, this is my sock. Very exciting. Like I said, I'm going back and forth about whether this needs to be like a full-blown tutorial for creating hard-wearing socks, or if this is just like a tip list style video that I can make. But be on the lookout for that. That'll be coming out at some point in some form, yet to be determined. Now I've got a project that, unlike the last one, will absolutely turn into some sort of design, but it is still in its infancy at this point, so I don't quite know the specific shape it's going to take yet. So basically, I got some new yarn from my local yarn store the other day, and I have never worked with this chartreuse color before. I've always been a little scared and repulsed by it, but I've just been looking at it a lot recently, and eventually it gave me Stockholm Syndrome, and I knew I needed to try something with it. So I've been working on some stranded colorwork designs, and I went a little old school, and I'm doing just like regular stranded colorwork now, where you're knitting both the contrast and the background colors instead of purling the contrast colors. Which has been a fun change of pace, and I really forgot like how much faster doing colorwork is when you're doing all the same like type of stitch versus like going back between knits and purls. So it's been nice to like be speeding through some of these swatches. But like I said, anyways, I was a little scared of this color at first, but it has really grown on me a lot in the last couple weeks. And I know that I want to do some sort of colorwork hat with this, because I had a colorwork hat design last year, the Ion Spark hat, that there were just a couple things that needed to be fixed before I released it as a pattern, and I I just wasn't feeling strongly enough about it to like pull the trigger and like actually go through and make those changes and release it. So I'm hoping that I will get a hat pattern released this year at least. And so the first swatch I knit, this was just a little test to make sure that the two colors I got would work together. And yeah, it's working really nice. It's kind of hard to see when I'm looking at the camera here. The chartreuse is showing up pretty true to life. The gray, not so much. It's a very nice sort of like complex, like sort of like purpley blue gray, but it's kind of just getting washed out on camera. But yeah, these colors absolutely are going to work together. I love this effect that I'm getting. And so then I moved on to a technique idea I had for stranded color work that I just been calling like controlled chaos, basically. So I've got this first swatch here down at the bottom, and then I've started a similar but slightly different technique up here. And so basically the premise of this is that it is color work without a chart or without a pattern. And so basically what I did was I had a few like 2 stitch wide stripes in the chartreuse color. And instead of using a chart or instead of like figuring out like a specific pattern, I gave myself rules. And I said, basically, those stripes can either move, every row, those stripes can either move 1 stitch to the left, 1 stitch to the right, or they can stay where they are. And I'm just going to choose randomly. I'm just going to choose on a whim how I feel for each of those stripes, you know, how it's going to move on this row. And as you do that, as you repeat that like rule process, it kind of creates just sort of like, I don't know how to explain this. Like, it's really like, it's kind of a weird effect. I almost want to go back and do it like on a bigger sized swatch just to see like if it changes like the way it looks and feels bigger. But it just kind of creates this sort of like staticky, almost like distortion, sort of glitchy effect that I'm really, really liking. And I'm really liking that I'm able to get like such complex results without a pattern and in such a way that I would be able to like explain it to people. Like I said, it's just those 3 rules that you have to worry about, and you just like, once you get to a place where you have to make a decision, you just like do however you're feeling that row or whatever. And so like I said, I would like to incorporate this into some sort of hat design. My only issue now is thinking about the crown decreases and how they are going to interact with this, because I haven't really done any sort of like color work crown decreases in my life. It's all been just a solid color. I'm really partial to the crown decreases that create a spiral in the decrease lines. But I'm going to have to do some research on how, you know, people do hat decreases and stuff in traditionally in stranded color work, because that's an area that I'm not super familiar with currently. But the good news is, because this is meant to look so chaotic and random, it's not like I'm trying to have to like, I'm going to have to do a lot of like finagling to get this to work. I think it's just a matter of like learning what those sort of like standard hat decreases are for stranded color work stuff. So yeah, that is a new project. It is still a long ways off before I'll have much to show for it, but I am very happy with the results that I've been getting with this technique. Oh, and basically, I meant to say, so this first swatch, basically, my first attempt, I said, okay, these stripes are going to be 2 stitches wide, and they are going to have, each stripe is going to have its own like zone, and each of those zones is 4 stitches wide. And so as long as they're moving within their designated zones, they can move or not move as they please on every row. And for this second one, that was a little hard because I was having to count every 4 stitches to make sure that the contrast colors were staying in their appropriate lanes or their appropriate zones. And so for the second one I'm trying is basically as long as everything is settled up by the time I get to the end of the row, these can shift or stay as they please. So like they don't have any designated zones. They can drift further than they would be able to with this approach. And like I said, it's just a lot less mentally taxing because you don't have to worry about where you are or how everything's moving until basically you get to the last stripe or whatever and how it's going to move. So happy with how these results are turning out. It is kind of interesting to see how the appearance of the zigzags and the staticky effect does look a little bit different with this slightly different variation on technique. So I'll be interested to see, you know, how that knits up and how much different it really is from this first attempt. But yeah, that is my, as of now, maybe hat. Definitely doesn't have a name, barely has a concept, but it'll be something eventually. Finally, in the in progress section, I have a project that I have pulled out of hibernation. I haven't really worked on this for the last couple months, but I've needed just like a mindless project sometimes when I'm out and about and like waiting at events and stuff. And that is the Sandpoint Pullover by Elizabeth Morrison, or Elizabeth Morris. I'll have to double check. I'll put the name of the pattern and the designer's name on screen so that I get that correct. But this is the front panel of that pullover. And right now it's pretty boring. It is just a 2x2 ribbed hem and then stockinette until you reach the upper torso. And from there it'll get interesting. There is a zipper that has to be installed in this, and I've never done that before. So I'm excited to get to the shaping for that and the actual installation of the zipper. I think that'll be fun to try. And also, I don't have the other pieces with me, but I've already knit the back panel and a sleeve. And I really like in the sleeve because the sleeve cuff also has this 2x2 rib at the end. But then a couple of these rib ridges continue up the length of the sleeve as well, which I think is a really nice design detail. I really like the small details on this pattern a lot. I'm generally not someone who wants to draw a ton of attention to myself through the clothing I wear, although I know I just showed you like 50 different crazy cowls that I have every intention of wearing. But I really appreciate how there are some nice like finishing details on this, but it's not going to be a super like, it's not going to immediately catch anyone's attention when I walk into a room in this thing. But hopefully it will like keep their attention as they like linger and see all of these interesting details that I really enjoy. So yeah, not much progress on this. I have done a couple inches, I think probably since I pulled this out of hibernation. But really, it's like I said, it's boring knitting at this point. It's just plain stockinette. So I've been taking this with me when I've got to like wait places or do stuff. It's just a nice like mindless project to have on the go. And yeah, so that's the Sandpoint Pullover. I imagine it's going to take me a hot minute to finish this since I'm just sort of like knitting this when I find small pockets of time. But once again, that's okay. I'm headed into the summer months. This is not going to be wearable until October or November anyways for me. So I got plenty of time to finish this thing up. I've also got a couple of fails to show off today. These are just a couple designs that did not work out, and they did not work out in such a way that like I'm just gonna have to like scrap them entirely and go back to the drawing board. And so I'll start with one design idea that I had that I believe I talked about a little bit last episode. And that was, I showed some like drop stitch swatches that I had made. So basically, if you like intentionally drop stitches off the needles and unravel them down, you get these like horizontal bars in the knitting. And I was really interested in creating a drop stitch pattern that that was beginner friendly, that was like something that you could like just like mindlessly knit, and then once you drop the stitches it creates like a really intricate design or something that looks way more complicated than it actually was to create. And the problem with that was that whenever you do the drop stitches, and this is not a great yarn to like see that detail in, but the stitches on either side of the drop stitches tend to get distorted. And the real easy fix for that is to simply knit those stitches on either side of the drop stitches all the way up the column as twisted stitches. And so if they're twisted, they will actually, they'll get tighter instead of getting looser as you drop the stitches. But like I said, I wanted this to be like just like a super duper simple beginner friendly project where you just like knit every row and don't have to worry about anything. And incorporating those twisted stitches was going to disrupt that super duper like simple vibe that I was going for. And really, there's no way around it. Like, it's not every surrounding stitch from the drop stitches gets as distorted as the others, but they get distorted enough that I don't like the way it looks. I think it looks kind of sloppy. Like, you really do need those twisted stitches to secure on either side to make it look nice. And so, yeah, this is just something, I might go back to the drawing board eventually, but I'm just gonna like put this one on ice. I don't think that a twistless, beginner-friendly drop stitch pattern is in the cards for me anytime soon, and that's fine. I was like, looking at this swatch on camera now too. I was in love with this yarn when I first started knitting with it for this, but it just doesn't. Yeah, you can't see the drop stitches enough even. Yeah, this was just kind of a fail. Didn't quite work out, and I won't be back this way again for a while, I don't think. So that was fail number 1. And then fail number 2 I had, I wanted to knit a table runner for my boyfriend's aunt. And I think I've talked about her on this podcast before. And she's a very nice lady. And she is like a complete crazy person when it comes to decorating for every single holiday ever known to man. So I wanted to create a 4th of July themed table runner for her this summer. And the idea I had is just not working out. So one part of it actually did work out. So let's just take a look at how awful this looks first of all. So my idea was to do these zigzag stripe sections, surprise, surprise, and then couple that with these sections in white of just this sort of like knit two together lace, basic lace in garter stitch. And this is just awful on so many accounts. I hate the shades of red and blue I got. It's not at all the correct shades. These feel more, it feels a lot like that Grateful Dead logo album cover or whatever. It doesn't feel very American flaggy. And the separating out of the red and the blue from the white, it's just like, this is just feels so disjointed. This is so crazy. I'm glad that I only knit like one repeat of each section for it to take me to realize that this is a bad idea. This is not going to work at all. But the one good thing that did come out of this is I am very pleased that in garter stitch, I can do this zigzag shaping along the edge by doing increases on one side and decreases on the other side. And it holds its shape a lot better. If you have seen previous episodes of the podcast, you may have seen a scarf that I knit called Contrary Motion, where I did this zigzag shaping but in stockinette stitch, and these zigzag points really wanted to curl over badly. And while they still do want to curl over a little bit in this garter stitch, it's not nearly as bad. And if you're doing like a table runner where this is not going to like be moving constantly, you can just like kind of like pop them into place and they'll stay the way they should. The zigzags will anyways. So I'm glad to know that this zigzag shaping will work a lot better in garter stitch than it will in stockinette. And I'll definitely use that in some upcoming design. But as far as this specific table runner design, this is so bad. This is probably one of the worst ideas I've had in a hot minute. And like I said, I'm just glad that I was able to recognize that just knitting as little as I had already knit. Okay, well, I think that's going to do it for this episode. I appreciate you sticking around this long if you have. I hope you've enjoyed what you've seen, minus the fails. Those were a little embarrassing. But if you enjoyed this episode, I would very greatly appreciate it if you would give this video a thumbs up. It helps me know what kind of videos you like, and it helps YouTube know who to show these kinds of videos to. And if you enjoy knitting videos in general, I would encourage you to subscribe to the channel as well. I typically release 1 to 2 videos per week at this point, and a lot of them are podcast episodes like this, but I also do knitting tutorial videos. I do just sort of like general interest and instructional knitting videos as well. It's a little bit of all sorts of knitting things. And if that sounds like that's up your alley, then I'd appreciate you subscribing to the channel as well. But for this episode, I'm going to go ahead and say bye, and I'll see you in the next one.